Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a market you might not think about every day,
That's right.
but it shows some seriously compelling trends. We've got our hands on a detailed outlook, a forecast for the global Mini Skimmers Market.
Packed with data.
Yeah, packed with market research data across regions for 2021, 2025, and projections all the way out to 2033.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission here is really to unpack what these numbers actually mean. The key trends, the regional differences.
The story behind the data.
Exactly. Where this market is truly heading. And just so we're clear, when we say mini skimmers, well, what are we talking about?
We're talking about those smaller devices often used in industry. They remove oils, grease, that kind of thing from liquid surfaces.
Right, like in tanks or pits.
Exactly. Tanks, pits, smaller water bodies, they're really vital for things like wastewater treatment or just keeping fluids clean in manufacturing processes.
Okay, got it. Critical little devices.
Yeah.
All right, let's unpack this.
Absolutely. It's easy to kind of gloss over markets like these, but the data shows a really vibrant picture. Lots of growth.
Driven by some fundamental things, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. Industrial needs, environmental factors. We'll get into that.
Okay, let's dive straight into the global overview then. What's the big takeaway worldwide?
The global picture, it's unequivocally one of strong, sustained growth. The source shows back in 2021, the market was valued at $762.1 million.
762 million. Okay.
Then looking ahead to 2025, that's expected to climb to $995.2 million.
Almost a billion.
Getting close. But here's where it gets really interesting. The projection for 2033 jumps significantly to $1,697.2 million.
Wow, okay, so nearly doubling the market size from 2021 to 2033. That's pretty robust.
It really is. And that kind of expansion over the decade translates to a healthy compound annual growth rate, the CAGR of 6.9% globally.
6.9%. That's just pretty consistent underlying drivers, right?
Yeah.
Not just a blip.
Exactly. There's sustained demand there. It's not just a temporary spike. Technology is probably playing a part too.
Right, feels fundamentally driven.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that global picture, let's start drilling down. North America, usually a big player. What are the numbers saying there?
North America is definitely significant,
Yeah.
though its growth rate is actually slightly below that global average we just mentioned.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the data shows the region generated $302.5 million in 2021.
Okay.
Forecast to grow to $389.9 million in 2025,
Mm-hmm.
and reaching a projected $655.3 million by 2033. So that gives it a regional CR of 6.7%.
6.7%. So just a hair under the global 6.9. Now, within North America, how do the countries stack up? Is it all moving together?
Not at all, actually. And that's where we start to see some fascinating variations.
Okay.
So the United States is the biggest market by far. It was $222.4 million in 2021.
Right.
And it's projected to hit $455.9 million by 2033. But its growth, its CAGR, is the slowest in the region at 6.3%.
Only 6.3%. So where's the faster growth then?
Well, what's really interesting is how Canada and Mexico are doing. They started smaller, right? $46.3 million for Canada, $33.9 million for Mexico in 21. But they're actually outpacing the U.S. quite a bit. Canada's forecast to reach $115.6 million by 2033, leading the region with a 7.7% CAGR.
7.7. Okay.
And Mexico is projected to hit $83.8 million, also with a strong CAGR of 7.4%.
So the smaller markets there are growing faster.
Mhm.
That variance, it suggests different stages of maturity maybe, or local factors, wouldn't you say?
It certainly points that way. You know, the source later mentions drivers like industrial uses, regulations.
Right.
It's plausible that maybe in Canada and Mexico, certain industries needing these skimmers are just expanding faster, or maybe new regulations are kicking in.
Creating newer demand compared to the perhaps more established U.S. market.
Exactly. That could be it.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic, Europe. How does that region compare?
Europe's another major market, and its growth is actually very close to the global average.
Yeah.
The regional revenue was $246.9 million in 2021. It's expected to grow to $318.8 million in 2025. And the forecast for 2033 is $537.7 million. So that's a regional CAGR of 6.8%.
6.8, right on the global average, basically.
Yeah.
But Europe is such a patchwork. What about the individual countries?
Again, yeah, notable differences. The UK really stands out. It shows a particularly high growth rate, 7.9% CAGR.
7.9. That's high.
It is, climbing from $18.3 million to to $45.5 million by 2033. Germany is the biggest market there,
Right.
growing from 43 million to 99 million. Still solid growth, 7.2% CAGR.
Okay.
Then you have France and Italy growing a bit more modestly, both at 6.1% CAGR.
6.1.
Russia's a bit slower at 5.7%, Spain's at 6.2%, and Luxembourg 7%.
So the UK is a real European hotspot for this market. Anything else jump out from the European data?
Absolutely. What's really striking in Europe is the rest of Europe category.
A catch-all group.
Exactly. This segment, the country's not specifically listed. It shows the highest regional CAGR we've seen so far, a substantial 8.3%.
Wow, 8.3% for rest of Europe. That's really significant.
It really is. It grew from $30.4 million in 2021 and is projected to hit $80.1 million by 2033.
That is some collective growth rate. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's happening in those specific, maybe smaller markets combined?
Yeah, what's fueling that?
Is it new?
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Specific, maybe smaller markets combined.
Yeah, what's fueling that?
Is it new industries, new regulations coming online across a bunch of diverse countries?
Precisely. It suggests pretty widespread adoption or expansion, maybe in markets starting from a smaller base, but clearly having strong momentum.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, switching gears again. Let's look at Asia Pacific. How does that, engine of global growth factor in here?
Asia Pacific is definitely a strong growth engine for Mini Skimmers too. Its regional CAGR is 7.2%, so above the global average.
7.2, okay.
And the total value.
The region's revenue is projected to go from $141 million in 2021 up to $335.3 million by 2033.
So significant growth there. Which countries are really driving that in Asia Pacific?
Yeah.
Well, China is the largest market and a key driver. It's rising from $57.1 million to $141 million by 2033. That's a 7.6% CAGR.
Strong.
Japan's growing, but more slowly, 6.1% CAGR.
Good.
But if you're looking for the fastest growth engine in this region, and actually one of the fastest globally that we've seen in the numbers, it's India.
India? Really? How fast are we talking?
India's market for these mini skimmers is expected to surge. It was $15.2 million in 2021, projected to hit $39.8 million by 2033. That boasts an impressive 8% CAGR.
8%. Okay, that really stands out. That suggests something is seriously accelerating demand there. Maybe rapid industrialization. Or, like you said, environmental compliance.
That high rate is certainly a key takeaway. It really aligns with that idea, doesn't it? Developing industrial economies, increasing regulatory focus. You'd expect faster adoption, right?
Makes sense. What about the others in APAC?
South Korea is growing at 6.9%, pretty much the global average. Australia is at 7%. And Southeast Asia collectively is showing strong growth, too, at 7.5%.
Interesting. Okay, moving south now. South America, what's the picture there?
South America shows pretty consistent growth across the board, generally around that global average mark.
Okay.
Brazil leads the market there. It's growing from $13.8 million in 2021 to $30.4 million by 2033. That's a 7.2% CAGR.
Right on the APAC average.
Exactly. And Argentina and Colombia are right there, too. Argentina's at 7%. Colombia is 7.2%.
Okay.
Peru and Chile show slightly slower growth, though still healthy. 6.2% for Peru, 6.6% for Chile.
So steady growth, but maybe not hitting those really high speeds we saw in, say, India or parts of Europe and North America.
That seems fair, yeah.
And finally, the Middle East and Africa.
This region also shows healthy expansion, particularly in certain countries. Egypt, for instance, is projected for a really brisk 7.8% CAGR.
Wow, 7.8%.
Yeah, nearly quadrupling its market, from $1.9 million in 2021 to $4.6 million in 2033.
Okay.
Turkey is also growing quickly, 7.7% CAGR, increasing from $2.9 million to $7 million.
Also very strong.
And the rest of the Middle East category shows a solid 6.2% CAGR.
Okay. So looking across all these regions, we've got this really robust global picture, right? But then these subtle differences in North America, the hotspots in Europe like UK and that rest of Europe.
Oh, that was striking.
The acceleration in Asia Pacific, especially India, and then consistent growth elsewhere. It's this undeniable upward trend, but with important variations in speed.
That's right. That consistent upward trajectory is kind of the foundation.
Yeah.
But those regional nuances, they're key to really understanding the dynamics, aren't they?
Absolutely. So let's connect the dots now. What did the source material identify as the core engines? You mentioned drivers earlier. What's really pushing this widespread growth?
Yeah, the source material points specifically to three main drivers behind this global expansion. First, it's simply growing industrial applications.
Okay. Just more need.
Basically.
Right.
As industries that use these things, manufacturing, processing plants, maybe smaller oil and gas operations as they expand or modernize globally,
Right.
the need for effective fluid-to-surface cleaning just increases.
Okay, so basic industrial activity fuels the need. What else?
Second, and this is critical, environmental regulations.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
Governments all over the world are implementing or strengthening rules about wastewater discharge quality, pollution prevention, spill containment, and these regulations often mandate removing surface contaminants before liquids can be released or, processed further. That creates a direct regulatory push for skimmers.
So industry needs it, and regulations often require it. Got it.
That's it.
And the third driver,
The third one is technological advancements.
improving the product itself.
Exactly. Improvements in mini skimmer design. Think more efficient motors, maybe better materials to handle specific chemicals, increased portability, or just enhanced separation techniques.
Right.
All that makes these devices more effective, more durable, easier to use,
Right.
which in turn makes them a more attractive investment for businesses.
Especially if they need to comply with those regulations or just want to improve operations. So it's this powerful combination then. Industrial growth creating the basic demand, environmental rules making them necessary, and technology making the products better and more appealing.
That sums it up really well.
So thinking back to those regional variations, we talked about India's 8% growth, the UK's acceleration, the pace in Canada and Mexico versus the US. How might these global drivers be playing out differently on the ground?
Yeah, that's where the real insight is, I think. For instance, India's rapid growth could be a perfect storm, right? Fast-paced industrialization combined with potentially newer or maybe just more strictly enforced environmental standards.
Okay.
Similarly, that high growth in the UK or rest of Europe might signal specific industries thriving there that really use these skimmers heavily, or maybe significant recent regulatory changes impacting a whole range of businesses.
Right. And conversely,
Conversely, a slightly slower rate in a larger, maybe more mature market like the US, while that might mean the market is closer to saturation, growth there might be coming more from replacing old units or upgrading because of those tech advancements.
rather than widespread initial adoption like you might see elsewhere.
Exactly. It's not just that these drivers exist globally, but how intensely they manifest locally. That seems to create the different growth rates we saw in the data.
The timing,
Yeah.
the local intensity, the specific policies.
Yeah, all that variation results in the specific numbers we've been discussing.
Well, this has definitely been a deep dive into this market. The core takeaway seems really clear. The global mini skimmers market is on a robust upward path,
Definitely.
driven by these fundamental factors: industry applications, environmental rules, and tech advancements. We've seen it's projected to nearly double by 2033.
Impressive numbers.
But importantly, we've also seen those significant regional and even country-level differences in growth rates.
Precisely. The growth isn't uniform everywhere, and understanding why is key.
So here's a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider after this deep dive. Given those varying key GRs we talked about, especially the real hotspots, showing much higher growth than the global average, like India, the UK, parts of North America, the Middle East,
Yeah, those standouts.
which specific local industries, or maybe recent policy changes within those regions, do you think might be the single most significant factor fueling the accelerated demand for mini skimmers right now? Something for you to maybe think about or explore further based on what we've unpacked today.
That's a great point to ponder, connecting these numbers back to the specific real-world
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
That's a great point to ponder, connecting these numbers back to the specific real-world activity in those places.
Yeah.
That really offers the next layer of understanding. Okay, so let's dive in. We're doing a deep dive today using source material that you actually shared with us. And it's a market report, specifically looking at mini skimmers. Probably not something most people think about much.
Yeah, exactly. Not top of mind for everyone. But the report, it really makes a case for them, calls them quietly essential, I think was the phrase,
Quietly essential, right?
for industry and, sustainability efforts too.
So our mission here is basically to pull out the key stuff from this report, like what's pushing the market, what are the roadblocks, and what the future might look like. It actually sounds pretty relevant.
It really is. Surprisingly so. We can unpack, the demand drivers, the challenges they face, and, yeah, some interesting future trends the report mentioned.
Okay, good. Let's start with the why. What's actually driving the need for these mini skimmers? What forces does the report identify?
Well, the biggest thing, according to this report, is the need for better fluid maintenance, especially in manufacturing. Think automotive, aerospace, metalworking. They use a lot of coolants, process fluids. And you get this tramp oil, waste oil getting in there.
Right, contaminating things.
Exactly. And that messes with the fluid life. It can damage expensive machines. So mini skimmers, they're small, they're efficient for getting that oil out right where it happens. They can fit in tight spots on machines, which is key.
Okay, so basically keeping fluids clean, making them last longer, protecting the gear. Makes sense. What else?
Environmental rules are a big one. A really significant catalyst, the report says.
Regulations.
Yeah. There's more and more pressure to cut waste, be more sustainable. So industries need ways to get oil out of wastewater before they dispose of it.
Right.
Mini skimmers help meet those rules, reduce the environmental hit, and even help with reusing water sometimes.
So compliance, being a bit greener. And there's a money angle too, isn't there? The report mentioned economics.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That might be the most compelling part. The return on investment. They're framed as really cost-effective. Well, think lower running costs. They're pretty energy efficient. Less downtime because machines aren't getting gummed up. And you're saving fluids you'd otherwise toss or pay to dispose of. Plus, you don't usually need a massive system change to install them. So, yeah, a smart, low-hassle investment.
Okay, sounds like a win-win-win almost. Economic, environmental, efficiency. But no tech is perfect. What about the downsides, the constraints?
Yeah, even with all that pulling for them, the report does point out limitations. One is just capacity. They are mini.
Right. Yeah.
Designed for smaller tanks, machine sumps. So the throughput isn't huge. They're not for, like, massive oil separation jobs. They have their niche.
Got it. So good for the specific job, but not a cure-all for large-scale stuff. What other challenges?
Performance can vary a bit. That's another thing mentioned. How well they work depends on stuff like how thick the fluid is, the temperature, and also if the oil is emulsified,
Yeah.
mixed in the water instead of just floating.
Yeah, that makes it harder to separate.
Exactly. So sometimes you need to tweak the setup or maybe use them with other methods to get the best results.
Okay. And you mentioned something about awareness earlier.
Yes, that too. Especially for smaller businesses, SMEs. The report suggests many of them, maybe in developing regions particularly, they just might not know about the benefits or maybe see it as not essential.
Limited budgets, maybe? Or just needing more info on the value?
Yeah, potentially. Education on the value prop could be better.
Right, a challenge, but maybe also an opportunity then. Okay, let's shift to the future. What trends does the report see shaping things?
One really interesting one is IoT integration, the Internet of Things.
IoT in a mini skimmer.
Yeah. Newer models are getting smart sensors, so they can monitor oil levels, how the motor's doing, when maintenance is needed, all in real time.
Predictive maintenance for skimmers.
Exactly. You get alerts before something goes wrong. Fits right into that whole Industry 4.0 trend.
Wow. It really shows how tech is getting into every little corner, doesn't it? Where else are they going?
Expanding into new areas, like food processing, pharmaceuticals.
Oh, interesting. Hygiene is critical there.
Totally. So you're seeing skimmers made with stainless steel, designed to meet those strict sanitary standards. Perfect for skimming surface oils, but keeping everything super clean.
Makes sense. Precision for high standards. Anything on the materials front?
Yeah, there's a push towards more eco-friendly materials.
Yeah.
Manufacturers are looking at recyclable stuff or even biodegradable materials for parts like the belts or discs.
Okay.
It helps lower the product's own footprint, which lines up with that bigger sustainability focus in purchasing.
Right. So let's try and wrap this up. Pulling it together from this deep dive. Mini skimmers, they seem small, maybe a bit niche, but they're definitely gaining ground. They offer these really cost-effective, sustainable ways to handle oil separation, keep fluids clean.
Yeah, across more and more industries, they solve very practical problems, like keeping expensive fluids good, making equipment last longer, cutting downtime, and at the same time, helping firms deal with environmental rules and waste reduction.
And the future seems pretty active, too, with tech like IoT making them smarter.
Right, and new materials expanding into new sectors. It's evolving.
So here's something maybe for you, the listener, to think about.
How does this success and the sort of tech upgrades we're seeing in these small, maybe overlooked tools like mini skimmers, how does that reflect bigger shifts, on how we're thinking about efficiency, about sustainability, and maybe about how technology finds its way into places we wouldn't even expect?
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.